With the onset of the 21st century, the world has been thrown into a technological and information revolution that has changed the way people perceive the world around them. An interesting byproduct of this revolution is the existence of the media industry. The media industry has served an important role in civil society for decades. It works to bridge the gap of knowledge between citizens and the institutions that govern them. The media industry has been tasked with seeking out the truth no matter the circumstances, even if the truth hurts your confidence in the government that serves you. Given the complexity of governmental institutions, the probability of corruption breeding within these institutions increases. Therefore, media has the obligation to keep societal leaders honest with their citizens. Yet, what happens if the media industry itself becomes corrupted? What if the governments decided to suppress the media industry's ability to uncover truth? Media isn't untouchable, and we see the truth of this when analyzing media in South Korea. In 1948, shortly after World War II, when the Korean peninsula was divided, Sigmund Rhee became South Korea's first head of state, backed by the U.S. In an effort to consolidate power, President Rhee passed the National Security Act, which allowed him to carry out political purges. The act's stated purpose being to secure the security of the state and the sustenance and freedom of nationals by regulating any anticipated activities compromising the safety of the state. Clearly, the language of the act is broad, allowing for flexibility and shutting down any political enemies. This act gives the government the power to influence the media. Journalists feared prosecution under this act for painting the government in an unfavorable light. Moreover, North Korean sympathizers also suffered under this act. This historical development represents the extent in which the government can go in order to influence the integrity of media. In 2004, under President Roh, legislators attempted to abolish the National Security Act, but ultimately failed.
Is there any value left in the National Security Act, or will it forever be a product of tyrannical rule?
I think the National Security Act was mostly placed because of that divide between communists and the non-communists, right? So back in the days, if someone even mentioned anything that's close to communism, or even read books about communism, or something along that lines, they were punished.
During the early 1970s, the Korean government used a mixture of martial laws and emergency decrees to prevent the press from criticizing the government. In 1972, President Park Chung-hee issued Martial Law Decree No. 1, stating, "The decree banned all indoor and outdoor demonstrations for the purpose of political activities and made speeches, publications, press, and broadcasts subject to censorship." This martial law contributed to a news blackout with these parameters. This first martial law was only the start of it, and the ninth martial law, issued in 1975, was the most drastic. It prohibited the press from negating or opposing the new constitution and also from advocating its revision or abolition. This led to 7 journalists being convicted in Seoul. President Park Chung-hee also went as far as closing 49 out of 64 daily newspapers in Seoul. Again, this goes to show that the relationship between the government and the media is filled with contention, which makes both parties vulnerable to corruption. We talked about how corruption of the government can influence and circumvent the purpose the media industry serves. However, like I stated previously, the corruption can stem from the media industry itself. An example of this is the existence of Chojongdong, 3 newspapers that retain a large market share of circulated newspapers in South Korea. Chosun-ilbo has 24.3% of the market share. Jongang-ilbo has 21.8%, and Dong-a-ilbo has 18.3%. That is a combined total of 64.4% of the market, the majority. Moreover, all 3 newspapers are conservative. Thus, political representation in the media is heavily skewed towards a monopoly. There is current criticism in South Korea surrounding the neutrality of the Chojongdong monopoly. There were talks that these papers had corrupted ties with the conservative Lee Myung-bak administration, as well as writing biased articles on South Korean businesses that they might be complicit with. Moreover, with their power, Chojongdong had supported a law that would allow chaebols and newspapers to own shares of broadcasters, further extending their sphere of influence. This law passed in 2009. Corruption in the media is not a myth, it is a reality, as evident by South Korea's situation. Media as an industry is nothing without a consumer base. So me and my team went out to go find people who consumed South Korean media.
So the first question we have for you today is, what are your perceptions of media corruption in South Korea?
So I would say like the perception is kind of like getting better like over time, especially with like the recent events, like you know how the president was impeached.
Yeah.
So like kind of getting there was kind of like also like something that the media played a big role in.
Yeah.
So like in some sense, like some of the media reports are like more trustworthy than others, but I feel like the general public has like some kind of faith or trust in the media, especially after that.
So I am born and raised in America, and I'm a Korean American. So South Korea is pretty corrupt in terms of media, and is like super intense in terms of like how people find money under the table, or especially in the entertainment industry, they will take like one image and blow it up into a whole different story. That's why a lot of celebrities are very on like the down low. You can literally turn one piece of information into something that's like far blown and like outrageous. It's kind of invasive in a way. And so people in Korea are very, this is also like a cultural thing where they're very concerned about like, putting on a mask and giving it like a perfect perception. So there's like no dirt on them. And I feel like there's a lot of work that like, is covered up often, and like, censorship is like heavy. Yeah, there's a lot of things that go dismissed and are unspoken of within news media. And so not everyone believes what they see on news, is the general perception. My perceptions of media corruption in South Korea, there's a lot of it. Everything, you can take like one picture and turn it into a whole nother scene.
I always, whenever I read news, I am honestly like always skeptical about how filtered these information is, and I'm conscious of like in whose interest these articles are written for.
In general, I look up Naver. That's like kind of our version of Google. It's pretty like informational, and it has like it's up to date. But I don't turn to KBS, SBS, or NBC for news because everything's like heavily kind of censored. And I have family members who do work in the entertainment industry and do like are very in tune with working with news media outlets. And so I hear their biased standpoints. they're always talking about having a separate team, like, that covers like news media, and they're very, very careful in terms of what they put out, and even just like the slightest mistake can like change the course of like their career, which is quite kind of tragic. It's a bit extreme. My parents and I usually go to JTPC now because there's more lack of like censorship, and they just kind of keep it real.
I kind of look more at JTBC
Yeah.
because they just seem a lot more like trustworthy. But at the same time, there's like a really big division in Korea between like the conservative, like old people especially, and like the more liberal people. And it always seems like there's like a blockade between those two groups. So like I would see like a lot of like old people like talking in cafes, and they would talk about how like liberalism is like ruining the country, and like some people are like super religious, and like yeah, so like I feel like those people just get resources in like some other form that I have no idea about.
Yeah.
So like they talk about things as if like they're living in a different world.
Yeah.
In Korea, I watch a lot of news like KBS, SBS, NBC, and yeah, those are usually my main source of news consumption when I'm in Korea.
I think South Korean media is becoming more and more similar to like the United States media, but it just seems like Korean media is a lot more formal than like American. It's like if you look at like American media, like they have like really casual interviews, and they have like phone calls, and like it just seems like they're more casual. But like in Korean, like news used to be like a lot more like rigid and like formal. But like that's why I kind of like JTBC too, because like they're trying to do like these new things that are like more casual. They bring people in and have like interviews with them, and like kind of like have like a lot of different ways of like conveying news. So I think it's becoming a little more flexible that way.
Formerly interned at CNN, and I don't really view it as much better than South Korean news media outlets, because CNN is all about, at the base of it, it's just like a business, and so they will only take on stories that will either like stir the pot or generally just produce revenue. And I could probably say the same for like South Korean news media. I feel like that Korean media in general is more used as like a weapon to just take down different opponents or company. There's a lot of control that media has in South Korea in particular. But then again, that's media in general.
I mean, I think consumers of news, I think, should in both countries, be careful about selecting which information is relative and be able to read through like whose interests some of the articles and news items are written for. And I think that's sort of universal in a lot of countries.
Korea's corruption is very blatant. People are aware of it, and people do continue either to dismiss it or just do nothing about it. But in recent times, a lot of things are coming to light, especially in terms of like women's rights, different scandals like for like prostitutions having coming to light, and so it just shows that like things are kind of moving in the progressive and the better direction. But people, when you see people interviewing about these certain topics, you see a lot of people acknowledging that there's a problem with the media and how it gives off different perceptions and how it divides the country in a way.
Like people in power are able to like pay money to like silence the media. So I think that's like what was really like shocking about like the Sun like scandal with like Sammy and everything. Like the way they talked in the chat room kind of like reveals how like manipulative, like how easy they can manipulate the media and the police, right?
Throughout the process of creating this documentary, the story of media and the purpose it serves has fallen from grace. the government as an institution is vulnerable to corruption. Media was supposed to serve as a watchman of our leaders, making sure transparency is achieved. However, we also saw how easy it was for the government to influence this said watchman through legislation like the National Security Act in South Korea. Yet, media wasn't even that pure to begin with. With the influence of the government and the desire for power, the media has been dominated by ulterior motives hindering the pursuit of truth. This relationship between government and media is an essential one that unfortunately is vulnerable to corruption. However, we see with examples of President Park's impeachment and Samsung executive Lee Jae-young's bribery that the media has been fighting for justly exposure and pushing forward for transparency. This means that media industry is not beyond help, and the cleanup of South Korea can serve as an example for that to the rest of the world.